Good to have you on SpaceX Daily, episode 21. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Today is July 3rd, 2026. Plenty moving across Starship, Falcon, and Starlink today. Starship's 6-engine static fire advances the 13th flight test campaign by validating the full Raptor cluster ahead of orbital attempts. The Starship program picked up right where yesterday's coverage left off with today's static fire. SpaceX conducted a 60-second static fire of Starship's 6 Raptor engines at the Massey test site. The test exercised the complete propulsion cluster on the vehicle slated for the next integrated flight. This step directly follows the prior booster and ship static fire sequence and moves the program closer to demonstrating repeated full-duration burns. Observers will next watch for FAA clearance and the specific timeline for Ship 13's launch attempt. The Starship vehicle completed a full-duration, 6-engine static fire lasting 60 seconds at Starbase. The test exercised the integrated propulsion system under flight-like conditions. Data from the burn will feed into final vehicle checkout for the upcoming mission. Community discussion on the r/SpaceX subreddit centers on whether the next flight will attempt new hardware or profile elements, with users tracking exact timestamps from the test video to compare chamber pressure traces. Several users noted the absence of visible plume anomalies during the 60-second hold. Discussion also covers expected changes to the ship's heat shield tile layout for the next flight. Space enthusiasts posted time-lapse footage of the Starship test stand being reconfigured after the static fire, noting the speed of propellant line inspections. With Starship's propulsion milestone now in the books, we turn to the operational side of the constellation that already relies on today's launch cadence. A Falcon 9 lifted off from Vandenberg, carrying 24 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. The mission continued the rapid cadence of dedicated Starlink deployments from the West Coast pad. Booster recovery followed the standard RTLS profile. The flight added to the constellation's density in the latest orbital shells. Amateur radio operators reported successful reception of Starlink satellite beacons on the latest California launch, confirming deployment and initial orbit parameters. Signal strength data is being compiled for comparison with prior batches. Local Florida spotters shared photos of the Falcon 9 booster landing zone preparations at Cape Canaveral ahead of the holiday weekend launch. One post highlighted the rapid turnaround of the transporter erector since the previous mission. While new satellites keep arriving, others are completing their service life. Here's what that replacement cycle looks like. 260 Starlink satellites have re-entered and burned up in the atmosphere so far this year. The deorbits follow the standard end-of-life procedure for satellites that reach the end of their operational window or experience anomalies. Additional units are already on trajectories that will produce similar re-entries in coming weeks. The numbers reflect the high launch and replacement rate required to maintain the constellation. Engineers in the R-Starlink community are discussing the implications of the reported satellite re-entries for constellation replenishment modeling. Several threads examine how the deorbit rate affects long-term slot availability in lower shells. Maintaining one LEO broadband network at scale is already complex. Now a second operator says it has enough hardware to compete. Amazon has manufactured and prepared a sufficient number of Project Kuiper satellites to begin initial service. The constellation is positioned as a direct broadband competitor in the low Earth orbit market. Deployment will rely on multiple launch providers for the remaining satellites. The milestone marks the first time a second large LEO broadband system has reached operational scale. The development challenges Starlink's early mover advantage in user terminals and ground infrastructure. Resolution will depend on launch cadence, spectrum coordination, and demonstrated subscriber uptake for both systems. While two constellations scale on orbit, the compute layer that will increasingly rely on them is also expanding. Here's xAI's mid-year snapshot. xAI released its mid-year operational summary, covering compute deployment and model development progress. The report outlines expansion of training clusters and inference capacity tied to existing data center builds. Hardware utilization metrics and planned additions through year-end are included. The update provides the first public checkpoint since the company's early 2026 announcements. The update shows continued scaling of training runs and serving infrastructure that will draw on satellite backhaul for distributed workloads. Power-hungry orbital hardware will need every watt it can harvest. One startup is pivoting its solar tech to meet that demand. Verde Technologies is redirecting its perovskite thin-film solar technology from terrestrial rooftops to orbital applications. The material's low mass and high specific power make it a candidate for powering large satellite constellations and future orbital data centers. The company is now pursuing qualification for space environments instead of its original ground-based market. Early prototypes target the power demands of high-density satellite buses. From an engineering standpoint, the 60-second, 6-engine static fire on Starship tests the full Raptor cluster under simultaneous high-thrust conditions that single-engine or partial cluster tests cannot replicate. The dominant constraint is maintaining uniform propellant flow and chamber pressure across all 6 engines while managing the combined acoustic and thermal loads on the thrust structure. A successful hold confirms that the propellant manifolds, turbopump synchronization, and gimbal actuators can deliver the required impulse without inducing destructive pogo or vortex shedding. This result lowers the risk that an early cutoff or thrust mismatch will occur during the boost phase of Flight 13. The next measurable step is whether the same vehicle can repeat the burn profile after minimal refurbishment, directly addressing the open question of rapid reuse cadence. And a quick market note, SPCX at $162, up 2.6%. Before we go, a Falcon 9 launch from Florida is scheduled for the 4th of July weekend and will be visible along the Volusia County coastline. The mission profile follows the standard East Coast trajectory used for Starlink or commercial payloads. Local viewing guides have been issued for residents east of the launch site. The timing aligns with the ongoing high launch cadence from Cape Canaveral. That's your SpaceX news for today. SPCX is trading at $162, up 2.6%. If the show saves you time, a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify genuinely helps new listeners find it. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen. Tesla Shorts Time, your daily deep dive into everything Tesla. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.